Okay. Oh my goodness. I'm sorry, guys. I keep clicking in the wrong spot. Let me just go to the next slide and be done with that. Okay. So now we're going to take a look at a video. This actually comes from the PSYOP trainings because I am a trainer, but sheltered instruction and action. This is going to give us a look at a secondary classroom. As you're watching, I want you to observe the teacher. What did she do to help the students reach their full potential? And then I want you to watch the students. What types of language did they use? So as we watch this, I want you to reflect on both of these two pieces. And then we're going to go into a breakout room and discuss what you saw. Okay. All right. So here we go.
Okay, before we start, I also want to just review with you today when we're thinking about force in our experiment today. I want you to be thinking about gravity, which we've talked about over the last couple weeks, and also the buoyant force. And your explanations later today, you're going to be using the words gravity and buoyant force. And of course, you're also going to be using Newton's first law of motion. So now I'm going to hand out to you the directions for our raisin experiment today. I'm going to hand it out to you and you guys are going to read it, and then I'm going to call on some volunteers to help explain the activity to us. Sergio, what is the first step for the experiment?
Put 100 millimeters of water in your beaker.
Yes, we're going to put 100 milliliters of water into our beaker. And we used the beakers yesterday, so we're going to be using the same size beaker that you used yesterday. And our first step is going to be to put 100 milliliters of water, or H2O, into our beaker. And lucky for you guys, I have the beakers for you already, and they already have the water in it, so you don't even have to do that step. Okay, let's have you, I would like you guys to tell your partners step 2 and step 3. Horacio, what's step 2?
Add 1 spoonful of baking soda to a beaker.
Yep. Okay. So we're going to be using baking soda today, and you guys have all seen baking soda before, but I actually have it in little cups for you today just to make it easier to get it at your table. So you're going to add 1 spoonful of baking soda into the beaker. So you'll have water in your beaker, and you're just going to take 1 spoonful and put it in the beaker. And step 3, can I have a volunteer? Ashley?
Add 5 raisins to a beaker.
Okay, step 3 is an interesting one. We're going to also be adding raisins into our beaker. So you're going to have 5 raisins. And you're actually just going to drop them into the beaker. So we're going to add 5 raisins. TJ, what's the next step? Step 4.
Add 15 milliliter vinegar to your beaker.
Yep, you're going to add 15 milliliters of vinegar. And again, you guys have all used vinegar before, and I have it all ready for you in these graduated cylinders. So the next thing that you'll do is add the 15 milliliters of vinegar into your beaker. You're going to just pour it in there. Okay, and I'm actually just going to go through the next few steps. So step 5 is that you're going to record your observations for about 2 to 3 minutes. What do you notice happening? What do you see happening?
Okay. So that gives you a glimpse into a secondary classroom, science classroom, which is always, I think science was one of the easy ones. There's lots of visuals and lots of things that you can, material, realia, things that you can use. But thinking about the teacher, what did you notice? What did she do in order to help those students? And then what types of language were the students using as they responded to her? So when you think about the environment, what did you notice? And then we're going to move into the breakout room. Now, when we go to the breakout room, I'm going to put 10 minutes on, but that's because I'm going to have you for 5 minutes. I want you to just discuss what you noticed. They're noticings about the teacher and the students. And you can even bring in your conversations about those other 2 videos that we watched. So just as a whole, really looking at what were your noticings of all of these pieces that we saw. So almost like this is going to be like a brainstorming. Okay. What we're going to do is I'm actually going to put more than 10 minutes on. I'm going to put 15 on. And what we're going to do is for 10 minutes, I want you to you're going to go to a Google slide deck that I have created, and based on your breakout room. So when you go into your breakout room, it shows you which one you are. It'll say you're going to breakout room 1, 2, 3, 4, whichever one you are. Now, the slides that I have ready for you have group 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so you'll just go to your corresponding one, and someone is going to be the scribe. And I just want you to type out what were some of your the strategies that you noticed maybe in the video that we watched with the vegetables, that food groups. What did she do? What did you notice with the science? What were some of the things that she was doing to support the ELs? You're going to record these strategies that you observed and you know to be good for sheltered instruction. And then we'll come back and we'll share those. I'm putting 15 minutes on because I want to give you 10 minutes to do that, or if it takes you less time, and then I'm going to give you time to have a break. So if you want to go, get some more coffee or get some water, have a restroom break, then you can go and do that. And then we'll come back and finish out our time together. Okay. So we'll have 15 minutes. 10 will be to complete the Google deck. And I'm going to show you real quick what that looks like.
And Melanie, can you give sharing screen permissions? I didn't have permission.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I will see how to do that. Just a minute. I need your help, Ivy. Okay. So this is what the link is going to take you to that I'm going to put in the chat box. And as you can see, it's just blank. Okay. I have boxes for you to type in. And so whatever your corresponding breakout room is where you're going to go and you're going to type in. And again, just recording your observations, strategies, things you noticed between the food group, sheltered instruction lesson, all the way to the science. This is just a place for us to collect. Okay, and let me move myself back, and I'm going to minimize and get you this link. Put it in the chat box and then make sure that you guys have sharing rights. Okay, there's the link. Okay, what questions can I answer before we move into the rooms? So 10 minutes is actually doing this or less, however long it takes you. And then 5 minutes will be for you to take a break. So if we say 15, so just make sure that you're back here, let's say at 10:55. Okay, that'll be enough time. The room may close, the rooms will close and it'll take you back to the main room. Just make sure you're back in front of your computer at 10:55 for us to get started. Okay, any questions? You see the link in the chat box. All right, is everyone good to go? Thumbs up, you're good to go, move on? Okay, all right, here we go. Okay, it is 10:55. I know that that was quick. I was trying to send you guys messages telling you stop working so you could go take a break. So I hope you all were able to at least stand up and stretch or go get some water or coffee. But I'm showing you Classroom Screen. If you're not familiar with Classroom Screen, this is a great tool to use in the classroom or for remote teaching. And something that I promoted a lot when I did my instructional coaching, because this is a great place to have clear, explicit instructions in written form. I can use the text box to greet my students when they walk in the door, or it's time, we're about to do an activity, and I can type everything out in steps of what I want to happen. This is free, and something to know is it doesn't save. So, once you close the browser, it's done. Something that I recommend to teachers that teach multiple class periods is you may want to have, if you don't want to keep typing over the instructions and it's different, different content, that you could always open browsers for each of those class periods. But I wanted to share this with you because this would be a great way to promote sheltered instruction. You can see that here there are work symbols. So I can use either the quiet, whisper, ask a neighbor, or work together. So if I'm an EL, I have these visuals to see. You also see a clock. Routines are extremely important for ELs. It's important for students to see what is the schedule, whether it's a self-contained teacher and they have those students all day, or I am teaching secondary and we're going to do this block of time is going to be our check-in and so forth, whatever it may be. It's important that routines are established. So if I don't know the language, I know what to expect. I know what's going to happen. But you can see there's a calendar, stopwatch, a timer. This traffic light, it's nice because red can be no talking or you need to stop, and then green go. So you could use it in multiple ways. The other I like is the QR code. So if I want students to go to another platform, I can use the QR code to do that, whether it be that we're face-to-face or remote. They've added this new media piece. I have not seen this. When I got in today, this was new for me because I haven't been in a while. You can do the sound level, dice. What I like about the dice is you can pose maybe 2 questions that you want students to address and tell them if you roll an odd, you're going to respond to this question. If you roll an even, you're going to respond to this question. So the dice could be used in multiple ways. And then there's a randomization of names. So you can put your class list in and use it to do that. And lots of different backgrounds, even custom. You could put your own school or district picture there. So this is another great tool. If you're not familiar with Classroom Screen, this can be used face-to-face, which is what I used when I was in the classroom, or now with those of us that are doing remote as well. This is a great tool to put everything in one spot. All right, so let's get back to our learning. And I'm going to take us to our slide deck. So I didn't ask you guys to appoint a spokesperson for each group, but if I can put you on the spot, starting with group 1, would any of you be willing just to kind of share your conversations and your overall reflections about those videos? Would anybody be willing to share?
I don't mind.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
So we were like, well, what do we use the 2 boxes for? So really, we just wanted to talk about mainly like the strategies and maybe if there was anything that someone noticed that they didn't like. So several of the things we did notice is them holding up the items as she was talking about them. So when it was like the vinegar, the raisins, or the container, she was holding them up so they can fully see what specific things she was talking about. We also noticed the directions in multiple different spots. She handed it to students. It was on the board. It was spoken. So there were many different ways that the directions were out. Drawing with the instructions on the board. So we saw a very simple little drawing next to every single instruction. The students were involved, whether it was them reading it out loud, reading to your partner. We saw a couple of different ways that they were reading it. And this was something we talked about that wasn't necessarily a strategy, but, you know, especially when you're bringing something to teachers to want to start implementing, I think one of the things that people often get, oh, it's just another thing we have to do. And really getting them to see that this is really just best practice teaching. This is to help all students, helping all struggling learners. It's just something to help kids. And so it's not, I have to now do XYZ for my ELs. It's something that is just best practice teaching. And then we noticed the academic vocabulary she used. She didn't try to use very, very simple words for her ELs per se, but with context clues, they're able to pick up what some of these academic vocabulary words are. And she didn't talk in big words. It was still very simple in regards to the whole conversation, but she did use the academic vocabulary when it came to those items to describe them. So.
Thank you, Arliana. Thank you for volunteering since I put you guys on the spot. And, you know, I would encourage you guys, as you have set through today, as I mentioned earlier, I'm all about continuous improvement, and we'll go back and refine. And as you mentioned, we weren't sure what to do with the 2 boxes. So that's my fault. I didn't give you enough explicit direction. And so I want you to think about when you, as you've watched me today, or maybe other presenters, and think about, oh, I wish that I would have had this. Now translate that with your teachers. So you're the student today. What would your students tell you that they wish their teacher would have done? And so just in reflection, you know, I'll make sure that the next time I present this, that I give better instructions. So thank you for sharing that. All right, group 2, who would be willing to real quickly just share your reflections about our videos?
Okay, Eric and I just, there are a few things that are repetitive to what Arliana said, but basically the teacher had all the instructions bulleted on chart paper, which was great. So she had an anchor chart up there. She read out the first instruction and then had the students talk to one another for steps 2 and 3, and then had them repeat steps 2 and 3. So there was a lot of repetition. She demonstrated each step. She had everything pre-measured for them. So there wasn't really any wasted time getting up, getting water. You know, a lot can happen on the way there and back. So she took care of all of that. She had lots of visuals, students. She used academic language, and the student responded using academic language. So there was a lot of modeling. The environment was safe for the students and very organized.
Thank you, Diana. Thanks for sharing and for doing it on the spot. Okay, group 3. Who would like to share in group 3? And I know a lot of these things are being repeated, so feel free to just, you know, make a comment, or you don't feel like you have to go through each bullet point.
I'll share, Melanie.
Thank you, Ivan.
We have a lot of repeats. I think everything that we had have already been said. So the one thing I'll add is I wasn't able to decipher, but I would assume by the way her desk or her classroom is set up is that they were working either in partners or groups. And so I'll just add that. I just thought about that while everybody else was talking.
Thank you, Ivy.
Did you hear that? I didn't have my mic down.
No, I heard it.
Oh, okay.
That the students were working in groups or in partners. And as you can see, this group too, you know, has kind of given some additional examples. So turning and talking, and then labeling and such. So thank you for sharing that. All right, group 4. Who would like to share in group 4?
I can do that, Melanie.
Oh, thanks, Jeff. I appreciate you guys.
A lot of similar things there to the other groups. We did, one of our members did note that there's a lot of moving the abstract to the concrete with the pie chart to the list of the vegetables and the actual vegetables that she had there to demonstrate. Also, we noticed that she was, the first video, much more slower paced the second time, more deliberate, not only in her speech, but also her actions. So I think that translated into a bit more time for processing. Our second one, we did a box for each video. So over there, we noticed the turn and talk. We noticed she also had a lot of anchor charts posted around the room. And We talked about her academic vocabulary, which was at a high level, but also high level of comfort there as well. And she had clear verbalized expectations for her students and for their outcomes. I think the rest is pretty similar.
Yeah, so this you guys notice that slower pacing. We often talk fast, especially here in Texas, and some of us have, you know, a heavy accent. So it is important that we do slow down when we have, well, not just ELs, quite frankly, but especially with our ELs, and to really enunciate and have, you know, clear speech. Because often when you're a language learner, and I don't know about you guys if you've ever learned a second language, but for me, like in Spanish, I really need to hear that word slow down so I can hear it and be able to pronunciate it myself. And so it's important that we do, as teachers, slow that down and be very deliberate in our speech. And you guys are all noticing that academic language, yes, she was using it and the students were using it. But you know, you may still have to scaffold that. So maybe I say, I use that academic term, but then I give a simplified version as well, to make sure students understand. All right, group 5, who would like to share?
Okay, I will.
Thank you, Susan.
Comparing the two, you know, visual cues on the first one where she was doing the vegetable lesson or the food group lesson, talk both in English and Spanish. Things were color coded, talking about the size of each group. But when she would ask a question, the students, it seemed like the clip stopped at that point when she reached out. Regarding the science classroom, you had the turn and talk, the hands-on. She would ask the students to read the next step, or a particular student to read the next step, the resources, and the students spoke in English.
Thank you. So overall, would you guys agree that the things you observed, the behaviors that you observed, this should happen in any classroom? You can use the chat box if you want to. Do you agree that all these strategies that you noticed, and those of you that may be instructional coaches as well, is this something we should see in every classroom? Yes. So I'm seeing a lot of yeses. Yes. Now let me ask you this question. If you were an English learner and you were sitting in that classroom, do you feel like you could get the gist and participate, you know, at the ability you could, depending on your proficiency level? Do you feel like you could participate and felt like you were included and follow along to some degree? Maybe not get all of it, but get the gist. Do you agree that you could, especially with that science classroom, if you didn't speak the language, could you still participate? Okay, so again, what we've noticed with all of these, the videos, and again, you know, I would tell you that those first two, that first video is not an exemplar, and the science one is very good. But all those ways that they made the learning comprehensible, that's the big piece, is making the learning comprehensible for the students. Are they using visuals? Are they being explicit? What are all the ways they're doing to make it where that student can learn the content as well as develop their language? And again, you know, that the reoccurring theme is, yes, these are best practices. Yes, it's great for all kids. And we want to see this in every classroom, all content teachers. But remember, for your EL, it's absolutely necessary. So if these things aren't happening for any student in the classroom, well, then all those students are going to suffer, right? But your EL, your SPED kid, your dyslexic kid, any of those others that need those heavier scaffolding pieces, they are going to suffer even more than my child that, you know, is your average kiddo, right? So that's something to think about when we share this with teachers. It's not one more thing. This is what we should be doing for all kids. But our kids that need it the most are our ELs, our special education students, and other students that have varying educational needs. So just remembering those kids suffer the most. And then when it comes down to accountability time, then that's where your campus or your district suffers. those populations, those special populations did not get what they needed. And so now on the back end, you know, you're looking maybe at school improvement, or you're looking at needing to make improvement in some areas. Okay, thanks guys. And I will make sure that I refine that activity for next time. Okay. This is a link, this will be a link to some resources. I just pulled out a snippet from those rubrics. At the very end of those rubrics, you will find some more additional information, and these have hyperlinks that take you to more, what is comprehensible input method? And as you can see, what does scaffolding look like? I just wanted to include that so you knew that there was more to it. There was more there to help explain sheltered instruction. So what should you see and hear in a classroom with ELs? This is a tool that I created. It's not an exhaustive list by any means, but it's a start. And these are elements of a classroom with English learners. And you can see there's a notation that some of these recommendations may need to be adjusted based on the proficiency level of the student. But you can take it all the way from welcoming and supportive. What does that classroom environment look like in action? What are the behaviors that you see from the teacher? What does linguistic support accessible look like in the classroom? And then it moves down to the teacher. What does implementing best practices look like? What does it mean to linguistically accommodate? And then finally, our students, are they engaged and participating, and what does that look like in action? So this document, I will make sure that I send that an attachment so you guys have that accessible. This is, again, just another tool to kind of look at, you know, your classrooms, and not an exhaustive list, but just, you know, from my own experiences, not only being in the classroom, but also supervising ESL teachers and what it should look like. These are just some ideas. Any questions that you have about this document or our recent activity with videos? Any questions that I can answer? If you don't want to ask, you can also use the chat box. All right, now we're down to our final section. This is a big piece. Don't assume. If I could write out a list of my top 5 suggestions for ELs, it would be don't assume. So don't assume parent education. I've had many students who their families held doctorates or master's degrees. There were doctors, teachers, you know, whatever in their own country. Family dynamics. We can't assume that, oh, they're from this country and this is typically what we see from this country. And I'm going to try to make this a mental note to send you a link where you can look up different countries and kind of what the norms are. But don't assume. Don't assume income. You know, just because you're an EL doesn't mean that you are on free and reduced, that you don't have, you know, income. So you don't assume that. And also don't assume content knowledge. This is one of the biggest pieces that I hear from students. So I do a refugee training, and I went out and interviewed past students of mine, of our district, and asked them, what do you wish teachers knew about you? And the biggest one that I would hear was this: just because I don't speak English does not mean that I am not smart, that I don't know the content. Especially when you get your secondary kids, you know, they may have been receiving all of this content and more in their home country. And so we cannot assume that they don't have the knowledge. They just need to learn that content in English. And that can transfer over when we make those connections. Okay. So biggest piece is don't assume. Here are some characteristics of ELs. And again, not an exhaustive list, but language. You will have students with wide range of English proficiency. Okay, so you'll get some students who they have a lot of English, but maybe they're still not proficient. You'll have some students who don't have any, and you'll have some students who are in between. You have some students who may speak a language other than English at home. So often the home language survey is what drives identification. So there are 2 questions. What language does a student use most of the time? and what language is used most of the time in the home. If either one of those questions are something other than English, then we start the identification process and we test them and see if they qualify for services. But know that many of your students speak multiple languages. I've had students that spoke 5 or 6. So just know that it may not just be one or the other. We also have approximately 180 native languages, out there. So lots and lots of different dialects too. Some that don't even have dictionaries. I had one group of students that came in, and their language was not even a written language. So I couldn't even find a dictionary for them. Experiences. Wide range of formal schooling. You will have some who were in private schools. You have some who didn't go to school. They worked. So wide range. They may have lived in the US their entire life. So you will have many ELs who will be identified as an EL here, and they've lived here always. Well, I want you to think about it this way. If I move to an Arabic speaking country, let's say, I'm going to find where are the English speaking people, maybe even Americans in general, and I'm going to go and I'm going to find a house or an apartment there. I'm going to find the grocery stores that speak English, have my food. I'm going to hang out with those group of people. I'm going to learn Arabic a little bit along the way to survive. But in general, I'm going to spend majority of my time with other people like me, right? So it's no different for our families that come here. Even if they've been here their whole lives, they stay in their little pockets. Some you may know throughout the Metroplex, we have pockets of Laotian, Vietnamese, and so forth. And they have their stores with their food. And that's natural. That's what we would do. And so just remember that they could have maybe have lived here their entire life, but before school, they're surrounded by that language. And we want them to speak their language at home. We do not want to discourage them from speaking their native language. We're here in the US, we don't value having multiple languages. When you live abroad, most people speak 2, 3 or more languages. But here in the US, for some reason, we don't value that. And so we want our students to continue to speak their native language at home and build that language, because down the road, when they are in post-secondary or they go on to a career, we want them to be able to say they're bilingual. And so I would encourage you to encourage your families to continue speaking at home. Also, some of our students may be refugees, asylees, or unaccompanied minors. And I'm not going to go into too great detail about that because it gets to be confusing, but they could be refugee here, or they've sought asylum here, or they're unaccompanied minors. And that means a child has come across the border on their own, or gotten into the US on their own. So that may be a scenario that you have in your district or charter school. And they may or may not have proper documentation, and we have no control over that, and we don't ask for that. So some of the indicators, when we think about PEIMS and the indicators, we have limited English proficient, that's your LEP indicator. And I like to explain it like this. The LEP indicator can be turned off and on. So it's turned on when we identify them. And then when they meet reclassification criteria, where we reclassify them to English proficient, we turn that off. They're no longer LEP. Now we're monitoring them for 2 years, and then eventually no more. English learners, you might hear, oh, I have a LEP student. Basically, that's what it means, an EL. So EL is the student. Bilingual ESL parent denial. So those are your programs. So you have a bilingual program, they may be participating in an ESL program, or they're a parent denial. And we have many who say, nope, we don't want it. I would encourage you, if you do have a lot of parent denials, that make sure that you are personally calling them and helping them understand what does that program look like in your district or charter school. And then we have, of course, dual language. When your student is LEP, they're also at risk. So when we code them in PEIMS as LEP, they're also coded at risk for language. Now, they may be coded at risk for other factors as well, but if it's just for language or for the LEP code, they're at risk. So once we turn the LEP code off, we turn the at-risk code off unless they meet criteria for at risk in another way. Then we have SPED, dyslexic speech, you name it. So we could have lots of other indicators. A misconception is, oh, it's an EL they can't be SPED or they can't be dyslexic or need speech. That's not true. Those students fall into any category that's needed. Also, something to note on SPED, I've heard this often, they need to be here 3 years or a certain amount of time before we can refer them. That's not true. If you know there is a cognitive disability or there's something going on, then regardless if they have English or not, we need to proceed with an identification and see a referral and see if they need or qualify for support. All right, so those are just a few of the characteristics. Again, not an exhaustive list. All right, now I want you to take a look at these. How do these affect language acquisition? And in the chat box, I want you to rank them from most to least. So when you think about age, teacher, personality, proficiency, prior schooling, and access to learning, rank these from what affects language acquisition the most to the least. And you're going to do that in the chat box. So when you're ready, go ahead and use the chat box, and you're ranking these from the one that affects language proficiency the most to the least. Remember, when you use the chat box, if you hit the return or the enter button, it automatically submits it. So if you're going to type them in, all of them, make sure you don't hit the enter button yet, because then it just pushes in one. Okay, so we have some I've already shared. From most to least, I'm seeing varying things: access, prior schooling, teacher, proficiency, personality, age. As you can see, no one thinks the exact same thing. You all have various rankings as to what you feel like most affects language acquisition. Continue to type in your rankings if you're still doing that. A lot of people think that or quite a few I see that you think that what most affects it is access, but then all various. So here's the thing: is there's no right or wrong answer as far as what affects or impacts language acquisition. There are various things. It could be, personality. Your students that are shy, they tend to take a little bit longer as opposed to your extroverts. So being an introvert or extrovert impacts that. Also cultural. A lot of my students that I had that were from Korea or even Japan, they socially and just culturally, they're quiet, and out of respect, they don't do a lot of talking. And so it took longer. They were almost in that silent period for much longer than some other students. So culturally too, depending on where your student is coming from, that impacts it as well. Age, it's very hard. It's also often, it is actually science that once we hit puberty, it is much harder to learn a language. And a lot of it has to do with our self-conscious. We're worried about what other people think. And I'm that way in Spanish now. Now that I've been at the service center, I don't speak Spanish anymore like I did when I was in district. And I don't want to speak because I'm embarrassed. And so, age has a lot to do with it. Where your proficiency is, personality, access. In my opinion, I feel like teacher probably sits the highest because a teacher can really make or break, that student's year. And, I think about my own children as they go through school. I think about students that I've had, and that teacher really plays such a vital role in, whether or not students feel comfortable using the language, taking risk, and but then again, that's just kind of my point of view. All right, thank you. Thanks for sharing, guys. Anyone want to make any comments about this, or want to feel the need to add on to these factors and language acquisition? Okay, thank you. All right, so now we're going to take a look at what my student, this is a question I often used to get, what my student is an English learner. I can't tell you how often I would have teachers come to me and say, I don't know why they're in ESL. They speak just fine. And I got that over and over and over again. But let's compare the types of words that students are likely to hear in each of these situations. So look at the picture number 1 and picture number 2. In the chat box, I want you to type number 1, and I want you to tell me what words would students likely be using or hearing in that scenario or situation. And then do number 2, and what would they likely be using and hearing in that scene. So use the chat box and share. What types of words would you hear students using in these 2 situations? Okay, so a lot of number 1, social conversations. Number 2, academic. Okay, so I'm seeing a lot of the same informal and formal language, social academic language. So in scene number 1, those students would be likely using what we call playground language. That's the BICS, basic interpersonal communication skills. And commonly, that's what, even in a classroom, teachers are probably generally hearing. And so that's why they would give me the comments of, I don't know why they're in ESL, they don't need it. Number 2, in the classroom, cognitive academic language skills, your CALPS, are what are being used. But I would bet that the number 2, the CALPS are being used by the teacher and not the students. Would any of you agree or disagree to that? In the classroom, what do you think is happening? Do you think the students are using CALPS, or do you think the teachers? My bet is the teachers. I like to say this, the ones doing the talking are the ones doing the learning. So in most classrooms that I've walked through my years, most of the talking is happening by the teacher. Now, at elementary, you do see more engagement with the kids and they're talking. As you move up in grade level, you will notice that more and more it's the teacher talking. What tends to happen is, so students aren't practicing the language because the teacher is doing most of the talking. And often when we would, at one point we were going, when I was in district, we would go, and at the end of the year, we would go back and assess all the students, and not to identify, but just an informal assessment to see how much their language had grown from last year. And I would have secondary students that were in pre-AP and AP classes and successful in those classes, yet we would come and give them an oral exam, listening and speaking, and they had not made any progress. They were still a beginner, intermediate, or even advanced. They had not reached proficiency. And that's for CALP, even though they're in pre-AP and AP classes. And again, it goes back to, they're book smart and they read it, but they're not practicing the language. So they could not ever reach that proficiency level on our listening and speaking assessment. All right, so now we're going to watch a video. This is another video coming from Iris Center. And this video, you're going to watch 2 segments. And I want you to think about, does the student have Bix and CALP, or does the student just have Bix? So the first video we're going to watch, or the first segment of it, I want you to decide, okay, what do you think the student has? Does she have both Bix and CALP, or does she just have Bix? And then we're going to watch the second segment and see if you still agree with your first decision. So I'm going to minimize and take us to the video. And again, this video has 2 segments, so we're going to watch the first part.
Where are you from?
Honduras, where are you from?
I'm from California. How long have you lived here?
2 years.
Yeah.
And you?
I have lived here for 4 years, almost 4 years. Yeah. You like it here?
Yes.
Yeah. What do you like about it?
People are nice, and I have a lot of friends here. I especially like the food from here.
Oh yeah. What kind of food?
Hamburgers and pizza.
Oh, pizza. I like pizza too. What kind of food do you eat in Honduras?
We eat a lot of food, but mostly I like the eggs and the beans and the cheese.
Oh, do you eat that food here too?
Yeah, since my mom makes them.
Oh, what's your favorite food that your mom makes?
Spaghetti.
Oh yeah. I love spaghetti. Do you like to cook? Do you help your mom in the kitchen?
Yes.
Yeah. What do you do when you help her?
I just sometimes she goes to the store with me and buys some of the things that she's gonna do for the food.
Oh, so you help her with the groceries?
Yes.
Oh, that's great.
Okay, so now I want you to use the chat box, and just based off of what you've seen up to this point, do you think the student has both Bix and CALP or just Bix? Okay, so it looks like most of you are saying you know she has Bix. You can see that here. Okay, no evidence of CALPs just yet. Some say both. Often, teachers really, they don't have the opportunity often to sit down and really hear that academic conversation because they're not practicing it. If the teacher's the one doing the talking, then the teacher's really only hearing this type of interaction. And so listening to her there, you might go, oh, wow, she has both. Okay, so let's see if she does. We're going to watch the next part of the video.
Okay, we've been learning about where plants get their energy from. So how are the roots important to a plant?
The roots of a plant takes in the water of the plant. They help the plants grow more if they're from the sun.
Okay, and how are stems important to a plant?
They're pointing to a plant, so they can get sun, water, and some other things.
Okay, and how do the green leaves of the plant make sugar?
When the water falls into the leaves, when the water falls into the leaves in the leaf.
Okay, so now what do you think? Do you think the student has both Bix and CALP or just Bix? So use the chat box to respond. Just Bix or both? Yeah, so she struggled to use the academic language. And we know, if I'm thinking about rating her in TELPAS, listening, she's probably about an advanced high. She fully understands. You notice the teacher doesn't have to do too much to get the point across, but you notice that the student, she's struggling to find the words. And often our students, they know what it is in their language, but they're trying to translate that into English. So, up to this point, when we watched the first video, we felt like she was really strong. But then we get to that second part where it's actually academic. And if our teachers are not intentionally providing opportunities for students to engage in the content in the academic language, and we're not walking around listening, then we may only hear that first conversation as we are in the lunch line, or we go and make small talk, or at recess, or in the hallway when students pass by. That may be all that we hear. And so we think the students have more. And then we're surprised when they totally bomb, our assessments, our assignments, and we think, well, I don't understand why they're struggling. Well, this is why they're struggling. They don't have the academic language. And I think all of you would probably agree that the reason most students are not successful on standardized tests is because of the vocabulary, the academic language. So moving towards proficiency, as we think about, okay, so now I know I've got to be very intentional about helping my staff, my teachers understand there's a difference between social and academic language. And are we practicing that academic language in our classrooms? But according to a study conducted by Stanford, oral proficiency takes blank years to develop, and academic English proficiency takes blank years. So in the chat box, I want you to take a shot at guessing how many years does it take to acquire your oral proficiency, listening and speaking, and how long does it take to acquire academic English proficiency? So use the chat box and tell me how long you think it takes. So we have some saying oral is 1 to 2 years, or 2 to 3. Academic is anywhere from 5 to 7, or 3 or 7 years. Something to think about if you have children, or you know children, right? Your teachers or have been in education, is we don't start school. Actually, kindergarten's not even required, but we don't start school until age 5. And so from birth to 5, we have all those years where we are developing language, right? And then we get into school in kindergarten or first grade, and we're continue to develop the language. And by second grade, now we're able to really engage in the content more. By third grade, that's where we say, okay, we're going to test you on that and see if you, have acquired that content at a proficient level, and we test students. So think about that in relation to how long it takes to learn or acquire English proficiency. So according to this study, it's anywhere from 3 to 5 years to develop oral proficiency. Now, again, there are many factors that can promote or prohibit. So I've seen some kids that really quickly become proficient, and I've seen some that take longer. And then there's those factors of, are they special education? Are they dyslexic? What other factors might prohibit, promote or hinder their learning? Academic language is anywhere from 4 to 7 years. So when you get a student in middle school or high school, we don't have 4 to 7 years, right? We've got to get them ready to go now. And so that's why it's so vital and so important that we approach our instruction in a sheltered manner, and that we're using those ELPs as that vehicle to teach the content, because we're already behind and we've got to catch these students up so they can graduate. When the students come younger, it's much quicker to catch them up, right? The content is not as deep, and most all other kids are learning English at the same time, right? They have English, but they're learning those BICs and the CALPs at the same time, and so it tends to be easier. It's at the upper grades, it's such a struggle. All right, before we watch this video, any comments that you have about the BICs and CALP and the years of acquiring language? You're welcome to unmute or use your chat box if you just want to make a comment or you have something to add to that. Okay, so we're going to end with this. Teacher, I wish you knew. Love your students. So this is another video from the SIOP training, whenever I do it, that I want to share with you. And I want you to hear from these students and what they wish that their teachers knew. Maybe it's running a little slow.
I like it when she does the groups or when like we don't understand something and she gives us a big explanation and she gives a lot of examples. Like she gives us pictures, examples, what it means, like your life, in your life, in cartoons, in a movie, in music. She'll give any example there is to explain the topic.
Yes, and when she moves slow and explain everything and to just keep moving and explain everything, it's much more easy.
If we have groupings, we can help each other to practice our English with other people. Because your opinion is not better than the other. But if you put that two opinions together, that makes the best answer.
So a real short snippet, but just for you to see what do students say, what's helpful to them. And I would encourage you, if you've ever traveled abroad and not to a Spanish speaking country where most of us probably have a little bit of Spanish just from high school or such, but really you've gone someplace where you didn't have any, language. What did you do to survive, and really translate that into the classroom, and how can we support our ELs in helping them learn when they don't have that language? So as mentioned throughout, sheltered instruction is good for all, but it's necessary for some. And that some, those are our ELs. And then I would, pull in our special education students as well, because it's helpful for them, but it's imperative for our ELs. And something to think about is your ELs won't always need all of the extensive scaffolding. So for example, the sheet that I shared with you of the elements of a classroom with ELs, they won't always need those things. And I explain it like this: if you break your foot and you have crutches and a cast, eventually you get rid of those crutches and you don't need them anymore. And you move to a walking boot. And so now I don't have a cast, I have a walking boot. And eventually I can get rid of the walking boot, but maybe I still need to go to rehab before I start to walk, or maybe even go and run. And so I would, encourage you to share that with our ELs. Yes, these sheltered instruction pieces I've talked about, we want to continue to do them for all students, but there are some that will be more extensive that you will do to help a beginner EL, but it won't always be that way. Eventually, you'll be able to get rid of those different scaffolds that you're using in order for the student to have make the content comprehensible. So my challenge for you is intentional planning to address ELs in any classroom. So whatever your role may be, whether it's at the district level, at the campus level, or you're supporting teachers or districts or charter schools, then really thinking about, am I being intentional in addressing ELs in the classroom? Because we know that we have lots of ELs for most of the part in most of your district or charter schools. And so are we being intentional? So I would challenge you to advocate and to plan and work with curriculum and work with other departments to better support the ELs. So real quickly, just in the chat box, what do you feel like your proficiency is now? Do you have a better understanding than when you came in, or is it the same? So if you'll just type in the chat box, do you feel like you've moved? Are you now at intermediate or advanced high? Do you feel like you have a better understanding? Good. So my hope is that you did move up a level, or even, as I've mentioned, within each of those levels, there's a range. And so I hope that you have learned, a little bit more. And from the perspective of leadership too, what are some other tools that we need to be including to help with our sheltered instruction? All right. So feedback. I would love to hear your feedback. So as I've mentioned, I'm all about continuous improvement. So if you would just let me know, there's 3 questions, and let me know your feedback, whether or not you feel like you, have made progress in your learning. And this will help me refine and reflect on providing this session again. So it's projected now. If you can answer those 3 questions, you may have to use the toggle bar to scroll down. And remember, just like those rubrics we talked about, it's not going to happen overnight. And even in your understanding of sheltered instruction and supporting ELs, it doesn't happen overnight. It happens over time. And so the goal is just, the more you can acquire knowledge and grow, then, that's what's important. It's about getting out there and educating yourself and making your teachers and staff aware. Okay, I think we still have 2 people left to vote, but I'm going to leave that poll up for you to vote and move on. So some resources that I'm going to share with you. I have this Google site that I had built a while back doing another session, and this is just an English learner PLC for administrators. Lots of different resources on there for you. You can see the leader pathways are sitting down there. So you'll have access to this and you can share it with whomever. I mean, the goal is for the word to get out. So that can be shared. Also, if you want to learn more about the program implementation resources, so the rubric that I shared, there's the checklist that I shared, this will be accessible to you. So this is a Padlet where all of those resources are there. You can share this with whomever you want. There's the QR code, but again, you're going to get access to this later. And then this is my English learner resource site. This is going on year 4, and I continue to add resources to it. If you know of a good resource, please share with me. But when you go there, you will find listening, speaking, reading, and writing activities. There are things in here for students that you can put students on. You can share this with parents. Also some information for teachers. And we want you to share this. So I want this to be shared out. You're welcome to share it with your staff, whomever, put it on your website. It doesn't matter. I want it to be shared with whomever. Also, this is a resource that I came across recently. Another service center had created this. This has virtual support and accommodations for English learners in Texas. I haven't had a chance to really explore it in depth, but I wanted you guys to have access to it. So you will get that as well. And you can see speaking. It just gives you some scaffolds and what does it look like in synchronous or asynchronous, and what are the online tools. So that is something that I think it's Region 1 that created it, and I snagged it for you guys because I thought it would be helpful. And then we have our upcoming professional learning sessions. We do not have spring posted yet. It's really kind of been in limbo, trying to feel out what teachers and staff want. We know that you are all so busy, and it's been hard to kind of work around the challenges of our current situation. And so spring has not been posted, but you will see the rest of our fall sessions there, and then we will have our spring posted soon. And finally, this is my contact information. You can click on these and actually it goes to TEA or Region 11 support or at home learning. And also, if you are interested in joining our s'mores, we have 3. We have the EL Leader Toolkit. That one is generally, it's more about compliance. And then I have Succeeding in a Diverse Classroom. That is starting year 4. And those are instructional resources for ELs. And then finally, my colleague, Gabriel Verone, has a bilingual professional learning s'more. So you can either use the QR code, or when I send this to you, you can use the link and you can sign up for all of those or one of those or whichever you want. But we would encourage you to sign up for those, and you'll get information, especially if you're in charge of LPAC or compliance. It keeps you in the know of need to knows for each month. But again, thank you for spending the morning with me. I know you guys are so busy, and just appreciate you being here, and don't hesitate to reach out if you need anything, if you need to talk through your program or brainstorm some ways it should look at secondary. I'm happy to do that. So don't hesitate to reach out. And I'm going to stay on in case any of you have any questions. I'm going to stop recording and I'll stay on in case you want to ask me something or give me feedback. Thanks again, guys.